light artifact. This is what so many people try to say doesn't exist, or simply is a figment of someone's imagination. It has symbols across the front of it. This is what I found in the forest in 1996 when I first encountered the creature, or the alien. I believe that it's some kind of bioelectric interface between the wearer of this device and the owners of it, that they actually activate. It has 3 needles on the inside that actually penetrate your arm, the wearer of this, that I think creates a interface, biological interface with the device and or the beings who use it. So my impression of it is that it's designed to keep control and communication between the extraterrestrial and their superiors. I believe it fits on your arm, the wearer's arm, like this. If you push down, the needles penetrate your skin, tissue, and into the nerves of your arm. There is some pain to it, but it quickly goes away. It becomes kind of a cold, almost a frozen type feeling. Very quickly that pain subsides. But if it functions, which sometimes it doesn't, it starts throbbing inside your chest, literally a pulsation inside your chest that starts from the center and emanates to your extremities and becomes harder and harder. And then, when that happens, then it starts to be activated by out there. I can feel it. I can feel it in my chest. It's painful. But if I hold my chest, it has a tendency to be less painful. And then they make the decision whether
bittersweet to come back to this area. You know, it was my home. It's where I worked. Where I ate, met my friends. When I was here in 96, when I was so sick, I was holding my camera just like this. Just like this. These trees that are cut up here, this all has done in the last probably year.
Okay.
And they do that just to keep the path clear.
I remember I think in the video you ran past your pack. You can see your pack on the ground, I believe.
Well, that's where it was. Because I was coming from
it's more like 6 or 7 of them.
See, all these trees are newly down. I mean, they weren't down when I was here with Susie.
Okay.
You know, we've had some storms, but it was right. It's really hard to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Right up in there, beyond, there's kind of a tree that's down, a little broken tree.
Yes,
there's a little tree. It's just in that area, right in there, kind of in between these two trees.
Okay.
Because that's kind of where I came down. This is a culvert, just a wash where the water comes in the winter. And I ran down here, and this is where I stood, and I said, I hear a sound. I hear something, and I thought it's a hiker. It's another person. And so I kind of ran through here, directly through these trees, and over that. And that's when I kind of walked down that way, and then up over into the obelisk.
Yeah, because you can't even...
I couldn't see it.
Right.
It was right beyond that those little trees.
Right.
I could see kind of something through it, you know, that felt like maybe a mirage or something. But like I said, that didn't make any sense because, you know, there's not enough heat to make a mirage here. There's not enough light and shadow. I mean, this is exactly the amount of light there was. This is exactly the kind of day. And the underbrush was the same. Same amount of underbrush, same amount of it. But this is the 300-foot, 300 to 500-foot area where it all happened. This is the place. It's a real place. It's not a park. You know, it's not a stage. And on that day, you could hear none of the sounds of the wind or the trees or the birds or anything. You couldn't hear anything when that happened, when it all took place. It was really tragic, the time that I spent here. It was really traumatic. And even this many years later, it still feels sad to me. People have said, gee, I wish I had that experience. Well, I'll tell you, I'd trade places with you any time. Because since that day, my life is gone. Everything that I knew prior to that is gone. My job, my friends, my bank account, my Social Security number. Everything. And why?
because I saw something, because I didn't turn it over to somebody who told me to turn it over, because people came to my house and said, "You didn't see anything, Jonathan. And if you have anything, you best give it to us, because the next people that come won't be so kind."
So I took a camera and I took the recorder and I turned it on and I again opened the freezer, and that's when I recorded this sound.
Would you play the sound for us once again, please?
Yes, I will. Hold on.
Okay, here it comes. Oh, my God, that's awful. All right, so over you went, and what did you find?
Well, I don't know how to describe it. It certainly wasn't vandalism, but it looked to me like somebody was looking for something. I do a lot of remodeling, and in fact, after this happened, I had been considering selling the house this clinched that decision for me. It took me a couple of months working, in my spare time, but I put quite a few hours in the house getting it ready for sale and cleaning up.
Well, how would you describe the condition of the house? I mean, were drawers torn open and emptied? Were things smashed? Was it a search that had gone on, in your opinion, or what was the condition?
Well, it was a mess inside. What was unusual to me was the house had attic access and it had a crawl space, yet somebody had cut an access right through the floor. They had also cut an access through the ceiling in a couple of spots.
Really?
Everything that had been hanging on the walls was gone, was off the walls.
And on the floor, or just gone?
Some things, there was kind of a central pile where things had been kind of piled in one spot. There were some things missing. All of the electrical outlet covers,
yes,
were off.
What?
Yeah, all of the telephone outlet covers were off. The face to the electrical panel was off. The toilet had been lifted off of the wax ring and was sitting alongside the toilet. It was weird.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
You, as a landlord, you probably went, good Lord, Doctor, what have you done?
Well, I was kind of dumbfounded, really.
No. Dr. Reed obviously was there. And how did he explain this to you? Did he say, I came home and I found this?
It becomes kind of a cold, almost a frozen type feeling. Very quickly that pain subsides. But if it functions, which sometimes it doesn't, it starts a throbbing inside your chest, literally a pulsation inside your chest that starts from the center and emanates to your extremities and becomes harder and harder. And then when that happens, then it starts to be activated by, there, now I can feel it. I can feel it in my chest. It's painful, but if I hold my chest, it has a tendency to
be less painful. And then they make the decision whether
we start it again? Folks, this is the event where Jonathan goes back and gets his video camera and he turns it on as he runs back to the location where the being was last, after he'd hit it. What you're hearing, or what you just started to hear, was his breathing as he's running through the woods. Thank you. Lights, please. Ladies and gentlemen, how many of you would like to try breathing as hard as he was during those moments? We tried it. I nearly passed out. There's no way that somebody could have done this without enduring and going through it. He was in a hyperventilated state. At this point, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Djonathan Rīd. Please welcome him.
Thank you. Could you see it? If you couldn't then, you can now. Excuse me. My name is Džonatan Rīds. Tonight I'd like to offer you my version of show and tell. I'll show you what I saw, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. And at the end, we can talk about it. I'd like to, at this time, thank a couple of special people who have helped me to come here tonight and who have invited me to let you hear what's happened to me. Terry and Bob Brown have got me here safe and given me the opportunity to tell you what happened to me and let you judge for yourself. And that's all I've ever asked to do. You see it with your own eyes. You judge it for yourself. And you decide how it affects you. First, I'd like to ask you a question. How many of you in the audience have heard my story? Thank you. Those of you who haven't, I will try my best to recap some of the event in a moment. Oh, and before we start, I have one other question. How many of you are currently working or have worked for any member of our government or any other? Let's see a show of hands. Well, to some of you who aren't raising your hand, and I know of 3 of you that are here, I have one thing to say to you folks. And that is, I'm here in spite of your actions, in spite of trying to keeping me from talking about this. And I will tell my story, no matter what.
We're here to stay.
Tonight I'm here to talk about the event that happened prior to what you just saw on the video that happened some 3.5 years ago when I was with my dog, Susie, and I encountered a strange creature. The video that you've just seen was taken out of sheer desperation, exhaustion, and plain fear. At this time, and at that time, I was almost in a total state of emotional breakdown. I had been through what I now feel is the closest thing to hell possible, just short of death. I had taken my dog for a hike in the mountains of the Pacific Northwest in Washington State, some 60 miles east of Seattle and 15 miles northeast of Snoqualmie Pass. I had parked my car, and my dog and I walked into the woods approximately for an hour and a half. During this hour and a half, we walked by trees and streams and mountains that were very familiar. I'd done this many times. Nothing unusual. But all of a sudden, my dog decided to take off running after something. Again, not an unusual thing. The woods are full of raccoons and squirrels and deer. We'd seen one earlier in the day. But this time it was different. my dog took off like a bolt of lightning and was barking, and I lost her out of sight. She ran up ahead. I don't know how far. There were hills and a lot of brush. And the barking got more fierce, and I was sure that she was in some kind of conflict with either a bear or a cat. I wasn't sure. I threw my backpack down, and I grabbed a branch just in case I could throw it or defend her off of something, and I ran to the top of the ridge. And when I was at the top of the ridge, I saw something that defied everything that I have ever seen. I saw my dog in what I thought was attacking something else. And at the time, at the first moment, I thought it was a child because it was childlike in size. My dog had this thing by the arm, and they were in some kind of mortal conflict. As I watched, moment, second to second, I watched my dog being torn in half in front of my eyes. I saw her head split in half, with her jaw torn back across her back, and her life being torn apart in front of me. I called for her to let go. But she couldn't let go because something had a hold of her. And this thing was vibrating so fast that I could barely make out the outline. But it was 2 arms and 2 legs and a head, but like nothing I had ever seen before. And all of a sudden, Susie started to fold in on herself, her body literally creasing into herself. And she fell to the ground and basically died in front of my eyes. I screamed as loud as I could for her to let go. But she was gone. And I ran forward as this thing looked at me. And I took that branch and I hit it as hard as I could. And it screamed, and so did I. And defending my dog.
I'd like to ask what you would have done. I've heard a lot of popular prattling and posturing about, well, I would have done this and I would have done that. Well, that's baloney. Be there first. Experience it firsthand. And I damn well can tell you, you will react completely differently. And anybody that's been in any real serious situation knows this to be the truth. We all like to believe that we would act in a rational, controlled manner. But when something like this incredible, this horrific occurs, you just can't. Your mind can't handle it. We're not used to this. And for Dr. Reed, he had never even dreamt to even begin to think he would see something like this. He lived a different life at a different time, like myself. And so when he saw this, how else could he have reacted?
I ask you, what would you have done? What would you have felt? Put yourself in my shoes for a minute. This happened within 20 to 30 seconds. And some say, that's a pretty short amount of time. I say it was an eternity. And I've had to replay this over and over in my mind ever since. I'd like to apologize for my language in the video, but I was sick, I was frustrated because of what I was seeing in the camera lens. Of all times for my video camera to quit working, I was furious. And then I just did what I had to do. I kept shooting, hoping something would be recorded, something that I could decide later on if I had any sanity left. Because everything that I had prior to this moment was gone. All of my logic was gone. Nothing seemed real or right anymore. As I filmed the video, I noticed that it would distort the closer that I got to the black obelisk, which I have taken to call it. And I realized that the farther away I got, the less distortion would happen. So I ran back as far as I could and tried to record something. After taking the video, I ran back to my pack and I took my 35mm camera out and I took pictures of everything at the site. I have some of those pictures here, and we can look at those now. Some of these are out of focus so that you believe they're real. Because as I have been told, if they're too sharp, they're obviously not real. Again, this is the obelisk from a long distance. It was 9 feet by 2.5 by about 3.5 or 4 feet wide. It had 6 sides, 6 definite sides. It was made out of something that felt like granite or marble. It was hard like stone. And it was cold like dry ice, because eventually I did go up and touch it. People have said, oh, these pictures have been manipulated. Well, what you're looking at is not a digital copy. These are 35mm slides. These are the originals. You can see the definition between the sides and the top and the bottom. This, in my mind, after thinking about this for a long time, I don't necessarily call this a ship or a craft, but possibly a toolbox, possibly a container for something. I don't know. I don't have those answers. Some people have stated that this possibly could have been an entry point and an exit, possibly a biomorphic gate to transfer from one dimension to another.
Some members of the Alliance have stated that they felt that it might be the reason when Jonathan touched it, it wouldn't move is because it's actually anchored to 2 points at the same time, here and the home world or wherever that is. So it's actually in 2 places at the same time. You can't move it. It won't budge.
The negatives or the slides of this have been looked at and verified to have not been digitally manipulated by more than one source, out of my hands, independent of me.
Art Bell was one. I imagine most people here know Art Bell. So Art Bell was one, Eastman Kodak was the other.
This is a pretty good example of what I saw. To give you an idea of how I came across this thing, After I knocked the creature down, I became instantly violently sick. So sick that I could not control all of my bodily functions. I had diarrhea, I had nausea. I couldn't stand for more than about 5 or 6 minutes at the most without falling to the ground. I did my best to try to regain some kind of strength, some kind of composure, but again, the sickness would come and overtake me, and I would lay on the ground, unable to move, unable to get up. Some people have said, well, why didn't you just run away? I couldn't. I could not move. I laid there for probably more than an hour, trying to move in a 10-foot circle, where I had no ability to stand. I would stand and I would fall down. At one point I stood and I fell and I tore my shirt against a tree. And then I began to hear a sound that was like a harmonic coming from somewhere out there. At first I thought, oh, it's a hiker, it's another hiker, it's a camper. They can help me. And I needed help. And I listened and I stood up and I tried to find where that sound was coming from. And it was an irritating sound, almost a low ebb harmonic sound. And I would walk and I would listen, and then I couldn't hear it any longer. And I'd get frustrated and I'd get sick and I'd get angry. I had to keep in the moment. I had to think of things like, can I take the next step without falling down? Can I survive the next 5 minutes? At one point, I didn't know if this was reality or not. And I would stand up and count my fingers to keep telling myself that, yes, this wasn't a dream and I was still functioning somewhat. After a few moments, I heard the sound again. And again, I crawled toward what I heard and what I thought was hopefully some help. And through the trees, I saw what looked like a mirage. I saw the trees and the light bend just slightly. But this was unusual because it was an overcast day. But that's where the sound was coming from. And so I went through the brush, waiting, hoping somebody would be there. And I went down the hill and over the rise, and I saw this black thing. And it wasn't help. And I looked at it, and I fell against it. And the cold from the surface burned my hand as if it was dry ice. And it was hard, and it was cold. But I felt like there was some other presence there. Like it wasn't just a cold piece of stone. Like there was some kind of consciousness that I can't explain. I looked around and I noticed this thing was not touching the ground. And I got sick. And I couldn't move. And I was angry because this didn't fit into my world. And I questioned my sanity, as I do now and have ever since. But I know I wasn't insane, and I'm not now. And I know what I saw, and it was there.
Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. And I think everybody here should be pretty comfortable with that.
To sum up what happened, what I call the event, I then tried to regain strength as much as I could, because I knew I had to get out of this area, because it was going to get dark. When this happened, it was 2:55 in the afternoon on an October day. It gets fairly dark fast in Seattle. I didn't know if I could move 100 feet, yet an hour back to my car. And I walked back to my pack, and I drank some water, and I sat there trying to calm down, trying to keep from getting sick, moment by moment. Every step of the way, I kept saying, one small step. I can do this. One small step. And then I remembered I had my camera. And what you saw is what I took. And I didn't know if any of it would come out. But it did, and I'm glad it did. And if I was insane about what I was seeing, then now so are all of you. And I took the pictures, and I calmed down, and then I thought about, what do I do with this thing that I killed? That I didn't know what it was. And I thought about hiding it from the world, because I felt that I had done a terrible thing on one hand, because I'm not a violent person. But then I thought about preserving it, maybe bringing somebody back to help me. I thought about dragging it over and burying it so that animals wouldn't get it. Well, I didn't have a shovel. I had a knife. And the terrain in this area was extremely rocky and hard. I thought maybe I could take the thermal blanket that I had in my pack and cover it up and cover it with stones or branches to at least keep it away from some of the animals in the area. So I got the thermal blanket out and I laid it on the ground and I pushed this thing into the blanket. And then I wrapped it up and I started to drag it with the straps from my pack over to the hillside. And when I did that, I realized it was very, very light. So light I could hardly believe it. And I thought, there's no place to put it here. I'll find a place and I'll start dragging it back down the hill. And I started to walk, dragging this thing with me. And I never found a place to put it until I got back to where my Jeep was. And I walked over to my Jeep and I threw it back in the back end of my Jeep and I closed the door. And I got in my Jeep and I sat in the driver's seat. I looked over where my dog sat. And thought, this can't be happening. This is not part of my life, my world. It had to be something else. This never happened. This was an illusion. Then I looked in the rearview mirror and I could see what was wrapped up in the thermal blanket. And I knew then that I had witnessed something a little strange. And I drove home. And I stopped at a ranger station to get help. There was no one there. I don't know if it was late in the season or if he was out to McDonald's, but he wasn't there. At that point, I got home. I drove in my driveway. I sat there for some time thinking, what am I going to do? Are they going to put me in jail for killing someone? Because I had no idea what it was. And my mind was not very rational at the time. I went in the house. I tried to calm down. I tried to call my girlfriend. I left messages. They weren't home. I called my best friend, Gary. Left a message for him. He wasn't home. Please call me. I need some help. And I sat in my house, pacing and being sick and trying to calm down and trying to clean myself up for hours until I had to go back out and look again. And I dragged this thing back into my house because I was sure that what I had inside that blanket was my dog. That my mind had somehow made this illusion. And I took it out of the freezer in my garage. I opened it up, and it wasn't my dog. And I took it inside my house, and I grabbed the video camera from the pack, and I photographed it. And we have that video, and we can play that now. Oh. As you can see, I'm not really the professional videographer here. The big burrito. Five feet. Actually, it's 20 feet, but I think you're talking about what's exposed. of you who have commented and said there is no body shot, take a good look. Questions.
You're going to find out in a little while.
Pinkish, bluish, gray, which later changed to a brownish pinkish. Small. Don't know. Didn't make love to it.
You couldn't tell from the examination.
The clothing was all black. It had the texture of almost a spandex type material, but with a wet surface, almost a moist surface. Very unusual, very clinging. The eye pupils were a grayish with pink and gray spots surrounding the pupil. The hands were covered with the same material that the body was. They were continuous glove-like hands coverings, but they had 5 fingers or digits inside each. This is the video that Art Bell has in his possession, along with the one in the woods. The skin texture was like that of a pig, very coarse and dense, not quite as elastic as ours. And it smelled like rotting fruit. Kind of a grayish, pinkish brown. This is the wound, approximately 1.5 inches by 1 inch. Piece of the skull connected to the skin with a skin flap. Intercranial material was exposed. Color of the blood was red or dark cherry red, very similar to ours. Yeah, it could be a good ad for a decongestant. I'm holding the camera. They're my hands.
And part of the breathing is contributed to the fact that he was still extremely sick from what had happened earlier.
That was a joke. He had the camera taped onto a ladder, and he was moving the body in the perimeter of the camera. He was using both hands. Those are his hands in surgical gloves. Someone made the suggestion that he filmed it and did this autopsy, so that means he had 4 hands.
In regard to the feet, it had shoes that were also part of the same material. No definition line between, but the density of the fabric was totally different than it was on the rest of the body. It was hard and I could not feel any toes through it. Feet were very small, the arms were very long, the hands were very big. It was about 4.5 feet in length, and it weighed about 50 pounds. And again, there is the full body. Bony. Okay. Now, in regard to this piece of video, people have pointed out many details, and to give a little bit more detailed discussion about something that wasn't quite obvious to me in the video, I'd like to introduce you to a good friend, Cole Larson, who has come forward today to show you something that only I saw yesterday. And it's quite interesting. Can we run the Cole Larson video, please?
This particular video clip I made.
Just get closer.
Is that better? I made this video after Jonathan and I and my 2 sisters watched this in my sister's living room up in Seattle about a month ago. And my sisters were very persistent in claiming that the creature was blinking. So in an effort to see if that was the case, I produced this little video using some software I have. I took the video sequence where the creature is blinking and extracted that from the video and put it on my computer. And this is the original video sequence as Jonathan recorded it. And then I play it again and I mark those 2 blinking sequences. So keep your eye on the creature's eyes here. Right here. And okay. So watch the eye here. There's 2 different sequences where it blinks. That was the second one. And I'm going to repeat this whole thing in the next segment of the video again so that you can see it. And then I mark the segments with a little green text up at the top as the creature is blinking. And I'll try and point that out again with the laser here as it's happening.
So essentially what Cole is defining is that this thing was playing possum on me. when I thought it was dead.
Now, when I study this, I've sat and studied this little clip for hours. I also think I can pick up a little head movement when it's blinking. There's, you can see it here. That's blink sequence 1. And then there may be a little mouth motion as well, but there's definitely some head motion in this one.
Robert, you need to sit up because it has blocked.
Okay. So the next part of this tape, what I did is I took each of those 2 sequences, extracted them out, and then I ran them at 1/10 speed. Essentially, I duplicated the frames 10 times for each frame so that we could watch it in very slow motion. This is sequence 1, and here you can see the eye here again. This is this video that I took this from is many generations downstream from the original, so there's a lot of distortion in here you can see. But it's still, that reflection cannot be caused by the camera motion because it happens, I'm not an expert, but it would seem to me that if it was just light being reflected, that it wouldn't happen so many times in the same amount of time. Oh, there it is here. Close. And I think that's, yeah, one more time here. It's starting to get more obvious when you see it in slow motion like that. And this is the next sequence. This one is actually a little more clear. He was closer to the head. It's a little shorter sequence. The first one is 6 seconds of blinking, and the second one is only about 4.5 seconds. And again, when I look at this endlessly, it seems like he's almost surprised. That's the feeling I get from the way he blinks here. There's just a little shake of the head, and it's almost like he's becoming aware at this point. And right here is where Jonathan starts to move in front of him. And I think this is where he's deciding that he's going to clam up and play dead. I think he's aware that this is happening. That's my feeling. You have to decide for yourself. And again, in an attempt to help me decide, I took these 2 sequences and I did them over and over again. I did repetitions so that I could get used to seeing the sequence over and over again and decide, kind of get a feel for what's happening there. And so I do these kind of monotonous, but it does get your eye acclimated. You're expecting something each time, and I think you get a better feel for what's actually going on there. No, when we saw it in my sister's living room, he still thought it was a reflection as he was moving about. And I showed him this tape yesterday, and I think he's as surprised as you are.
You notice that he blinks 3 times every time and then stops. I don't know.
I haven't discerned any pattern yet.
I checked the mouth when I did this video and later in another closer examination. And for my recollection, I thought it was dead. When I pulled the eyelid down, I just pushed the bottom of the lid back in position because it stayed open a little bit.
And then after this series of repetitions, I was able to, even though the video is poor quality, I zoomed in as much as I felt was reasonable on that eye area. And I managed to make that area of zooming kind of centered on the head. And so this is blink sequence 1. I slowed it down a little bit here. There's the eye here. And the next one is the most compelling one for me because I think I see an actual eyelid motion here on the last blink. This one. And that's, I think Freddie was alive and active and playing possum.
Thank you, Cole.
Art Bell hasn't seen that yet, but when he does, I'll be sure to make sure he doesn't have a heart attack.
Can we go to the slides now? Thank you. Again, these were the wood scenes, and I'll quickly finish these, give you another little chance to look at the black obelisk. Can we turn the lights off on the stage, please? It is suspended in the air. It is anchored to the air. I could not move it. I could not budge it. I leaned against it. I pushed against it, and it would not move. It felt and sounded like a piece of stone. It almost absorbed all sound. When I touched it, the first time I touched it, the harmonic sound changed to a pleasant sound, to almost an inviting sound. No, the sound is not on the video that I can detect. Somebody asked if I had a closer photograph of it. The first one up there is within 12 feet. At another examination that I did with my friend Gary, we attempted to cut the suit, and it wouldn't allow to be cut very long. I cut the suit about 6 inches, and from the top of the cut to the bottom, it resealed itself like a zipper. I cut it a second time, it did the same thing. The third time, I stuck the X-Acto knife in, and it would not let me pull down on the material. It would not let me cut it. Yes, we did, but unfortunately, some of our dark friends have that tape. You are seeing about 15% of what I originally had. It was either stolen or taken from me one way or another. Now, I won't mention any names like MUFON, but we called a lot of people, my friend Gary and I, trying to figure out what to do, because we had no idea. We were looking for some help. And some people who identified themselves as being legitimate source people, who obviously weren't, told me they were going to help me and that they would preserve and help me analyze some of this material. I later found out that they had no part of MUFON, but I was told they were part of it at the time. My dog's body fell to the ground and became a white ash. There was nothing left of my dog. I'll try to voice the question.
We'll leave those questions until later, please. Let's get through the presentation so everybody gets to hear the story, because there is a lot more we don't have.
Again, this is a shot that I think shows you the dimensions. Definitely that this is not a pasted up piece of cardboard or a pixel generation.
It's actually 6-sided asymmetric.
And I think you can see underneath it. without any problem.
I have to bring this up. A gentleman, meaning well, looked at it and said, well, there's an anomaly here, when I had the picture downstairs. And I said, an anomaly? He goes, yes, it looks like it's floating in the air.
It is.
Thank you. That's what it's doing. You're right.
Here are the stills that I took at home, which basically you've seen in the video, but they're a little different. They're a little sharper in detail.
You can also notice the cranial ridge on the head.
Turn to the microphone.
Because there's no hair, it's easy to see where the cranial parts fit together. There was no hair.
That's simply caused by the shadow of the head.
It's either a fold in the thermal blanket, or it's some of the blood that's dripping out of the back of the head. There was no hair on the body that I could find. We turn the stage lights off, please.
People have argued, foolishly, well, there's problems with this photograph. You know, there's not enough definition. What they've done in their infinite wisdom is take pictures off the web, which is a bad idea. If you're going to examine a photo, you don't do it like that. As you can see, all the definition is there.
No, I didn't have a flash. Here's a good picture of his headache.
You'll notice the veins coming down the neck. This shot's fairly good for that.
It wasn't paper mache. It wasn't a hamster.
The left eye was open, now the right eye.
One of the remarkable things about bringing something like this to you fine people is the fact that you even notice things we haven't. I just broke my ear.
Yes, I looked in the mouth. There were teeth. There was a tongue. It was grayish black, fish-like. The teeth were needle-like. Single row on top, single row on bottom. We have the stage lights, please.
Lights, please.
Thank you. So those were the pictures that I took at home that I have left. The rest are gone.
Yeah. Let's wait.
The sequence of what happened was between 1 and 9 days from the time that I encountered this thing and when I no longer had control of it. It was at my house. I made arrangements for people to come and look at it, people who I trusted. From one time to another, things would change. Arrangements would be canceled for no reason. People were being threatened. We did the examination. We did a topical examination that we videotaped and we photographed in great detail. All of that information is gone. I took the information that I had from time to time and broke it into groups and sent it away to different friends of mine in fear of losing all of it.
One of the people that Jonathan sent this material to was his good friend Dolly, who he found dead.
After the 9th day, I realized I had no hope of preserving anything. When I went back and found my house torn apart and saw people going in and out of my house with dollies taking all of my possessions, I came back several hours later to my house looking like a hurricane had gone through it. Things were gone that made no sense to me. Fire files, 4-drawer fire files that weigh 700 pounds. Things that I had collected from years from school, books, papers were gone. Things were gone off the walls of all the rooms. The light switches and the sockets had been taken out and removed. They had gone through my sofa. They had gone through my sofa with some kind of instrument slashing it everywhere they could. They had removed the toilet off of the floor and left it laying aside. There were holes in the walls and the ceiling and the floor, like they were looking for something that wasn't there.
These people are very thorough. And when people ask us, you know, can you bring this person forward or that person forward, we've done enough. You know, Jonathan has done enough. He's brought as much as we can forward. We're not going to sacrifice anyone else's life.
What you don't know is the people that have helped me, have been hurt, both psychologically and physically. My friend Gary, who I thought was dead, I found after we were on the Art Bell show last time. We told everyone to let us know if they could find him. We gave out an email address. And some people emailed me. And we wrote back and we talked and we verified who they were. And I went and saw my friend Gary, who was one step away from being dead because he was beaten. And he was left on a road.
This is probably the hardest point for me, because I saw him too.
Gary was a 200-pound architect who's now a mere 130-pound shell, who has no desire to live any longer because of trying to protect Jonathan and what he had and not wanting any evidence or information to be released. And they used drugs on him as well.
He doesn't want me to do this. He doesn't want me to do this. But my friend Dolly and Gary, who tried to help me, are the way they are because they helped me. And that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
You know, this isn't easy. And I'm not very good at this. But somebody has got to know that this is going on. It's not the aliens that are the enemy. It's the ones that are in our own camp.
We have to stick together as a community. We've seen a lot of nations and religions and human lives devastated by division, by semantics. We have to begin to work together. This is an incredible journey we all need to make together. I've had the wonderful privilege to hear some of the speakers here, and I've learned an awful lot about a lot of things. We have to continue to do this. There are people out there that really want it to stop. And their way of doing it isn't necessarily to kill you. It's to torture you and crush you, because if they kill you, they make you a martyr. They'd rather see you destroyed.
I have tried to live my life as an American, and I believed in America. You know, I thought we had some rights, but I've seen them taken away. You know, I was happy just to do my job and drive my car and chase women. And little by little, that's all gone. Somebody said, what did you do? I worked with kids. Developmental psychology, child development. I wasn't the best student there ever was, but I worked hard. I liked what I did. I had a good job. You know, kind of the American dream. And for what? Because I wanted to get some help, because I didn't know what to do. This shouldn't happen. People know this is going on. I've had thousands of emails since we went on the radio. People who have never seen these pictures that you have seen, that have also experienced things like this firsthand, who know this is happening, who are deathly afraid to say anything, who have been threatened and beat up, and worse. This is not the first time this has happened. This isn't about me. I'm not important. What's important is this stuff has to come out. We need to quit listening to those who say nothing is going on. We need to wake up and look with different eyes and learn that there's things that do go bump in the night that we can't explain.
I'd like to take this opportunity to read to you something, Jonathan, we could call it a dream. I think it was much more powerful than that. This was shortly after his stint in the woods. This was during the 9-day ordeal. I fell into a deep sleep. In my dream, I was drifting through a tunnel of light and pulsing energy. I could see the universe dotted with bright stars at the end of the tunnel. I began to move faster. The light and energy surrounding me blurred into indefinable colors. Sound became visible. My speed continued to accelerate. I felt myself stretch into what felt like pure energy. And before I realized it, I was out of the tunnel and somewhere else in space. I passed through gaseous clouds and protomatter. My forward motion began to slow, and the stars went from stretched bolts of light to masses of glowing energy. Soon I found myself flying over a large ball of fire. Its intensity should have blinded me. Somehow I was protected. Everything seemed so real that I never questioned my place there. I simply belonged. It was if I made this voyage every night. I passed what had to be the sun of a solar system. That's when I saw it, a planet not unlike our own, but smaller in size. How I knew this, I couldn't say. But here, information seemed to be a part of the strange journey. They were facts I had no way of knowing, data that had not been obtained through the process of learning, but somehow were bestowed upon me by means as mysterious to me as the origin of the universe. I was floating above some sort of city. Its awesome beauty was beyond anything I had ever seen. mountains covered in purple and green, surrounded by cyclopean towers and large glass spires. Floating crystal tubes filled the azure sky. I could see clearly within them. What I saw were people who appeared to be considerably taller than ourselves. The color of their skin was bluish-gray in hue, and they all had staffs of green fire. I'll explain why it's so hard. Which seemed somehow not to burn them. I started to move towards one of the tubes in particular. I was accelerating, but not as quickly as before. I could do nothing to change my direction, and was in fear that I would collide with the thing. Ahead and past the tube were pyramid-shaped buildings that seemed to collapse in on themselves, only to be whole again. Were they actually moving, or was this a trick of design? For some unknown reason, I began to feel nervous. I did not want to see what was in the tube that I was quickly approaching. The windows as I came closer were dark and tinted, but there were shadows inside, silhouettes I could not make out. Something caught my attention to the right of me. I looked and saw more of the folding pyramids, but there was something else, a large black shape, slowly moving in my direction. Or was it moving at all? Could it be that it was undulating like some living thing? The size was staggering. It was a great triangle-shaped form hovering miles above the planet. Once again I was looking straight ahead of me. Then suddenly I was thrust into the tube. I moved through the dark crystal like a dolphin through water. It felt as though there was no resistance. Inside the tube was much larger, seemed much larger than it did on the outside. Inside it was about the size of a large passenger plane. Outside it had appeared the size of a small bus. I could see two people at the far end of the tube, sitting on the cushions of energy. Moving towards them, I realized that I recognized them. It was Gary and another friend of mine, Dolly. Gary was wearing a tailored suit, Dolly blue jeans, and a sweater. Gary walked up to me and asked, "How do you like my new designs?" Then he shook my hand and said goodbye. Dolly smiled and I woke up. I saw Gary. I saw what these bastards did to him. I don't know what these corruptible fiends are thinking. As hard as this is, I'm not going to stop. I'm right alongside Jonathan. I'm not going to give up. We have to get this information out, whatever the cost, or we're all going to live our blind little lives alone. And that's not going to happen to me.
Somebody asked what happened to Dolly. Dolly's dead. About a few months after I left town, I went underground. I decided that if no one was going to help me, and everywhere I went, doors were being closed, then I had to get out of town. And I went back a few months later, called Dolly, and asked her if I could come over and pick up the package that I had left with her. 3 hours went by. I went and knocked on her door, and I found her dead in her kitchen on the floor. It was later determined that she had died of natural causes. The package was gone. There was no sign of it.
Whitley Strieber once told me when I called him, and he said, in a caring fashion, maybe you should just bury this, after hearing Jonathan and knowing. But then he said, I'm not saying to do this. He said, but I want you to know, the closer you are to the truth, the more adversity there will be. That's the way it works. And that is the truth.
I have sent the message out everywhere I've gone that this will not stop with me. It's not about me. This tape is in other places, Art Bell, and a whole lot others. There have been people helping me, which I call the Alliance. From time to time, they have supported me, they have hidden me, they have clothed me. From time to time, I've lived in my car. And it's been hard. I have been run off the road. I have been chased in buildings. I have been picked up and thrown in a room and beaten up 3 times and drugged since this has happened. And for what? Because I have something that somebody wants. Because when I found this thing in the woods, I found a piece of hardware that I call the link, that I've stored away and I do not have in my personal possession, that has been photographed and looked and analyzed and videotaped and stored. And it will be brought out. These people that I call the Alliance have stored hundreds of artifacts all over the world. Some the size of an orange, some the size of a Safeway truck. I have seen some of these things. I held one of these things in my hand. Something that looked like a tube made out of a ceramic or pottery material that rotated in half. That looked like a tube, nothing in the center. When you rotated it, air came out of one end. Almost pure oxygen, I was told. No power source, no batteries, no connections. That was found in Egypt. I saw a thing that looked the size of a truck, that looked like a big glass sculpture, that was beautiful. But it had no seams, it had no front end or back end, but it did have a little hole in the side, kind of an oval or egg shape. And inside, there were 2 formed seats that probably only a child could fit in. And in that surface was embedded inside hieroglyphics, symbols that looked like Egyptian or Korean symbols. But they've never been cataloged before. They're not anything that anybody has cataloged here. They can't determine what this structure is made out of. And when it is activated, when some of these hieroglyphics are supposedly activated, it creates an anomaly from the front and the back end that reaches 10 miles in length, a magnetic distortion. This piece of hardware was found in Idaho in a mine 2 miles below the surface. No one knows what it's for. But the same hieroglyphics that are on it are on the thing I found. Can we show that video, please? This is the link artifact. It measures 3.5 inches by 4.5 inches. It is 3/16 of an inch in thickness. These are three of the four of the hieroglyphs. The small one in the lower right-hand corner is shaped very similar to the obelisk, which is a symbol in the Egyptian hieroglyphics that indicates a door, an opening, or a form of communication. Each one of the hieroglyphs is a type of keypad thought to be. When I had this in my possession, I placed it on the creature's arm, and it closed by itself tightly around the clothing of the creature. As it closed, it became black, like the suit, and bonded directly to the suit. By pushing the little obelisk button, it released. The material is made out of a very unusual mixture of compounds. Some we don't know. Some we do know. Beryllium, aluminum, gold, copper, manganese, bismuth, these pictures were taken in Osaka, Japan, by the people who did the analysis for the Alliance. Each angle is said to have a specific reason. One thought is that one end of it is a receiver, the other end is a transmitter. It is basically a biological and mechanical controller, thought to control something between the wearer and possibly a keeper. Could be a link, could be a leash, to keep track of the one wearing it. It is hard like steel. It couldn't be bent. And has some very unique properties to it. Under forensic X-ray examination, the interior is made of layers of material, similar to a lamination. Between each lamination is a fibrous material, similar to a plant fiber, suspended within an organic material. All of those layers are put together and have this overwrapping fiber that is thought to be some kind of living circuit. In a moment, you'll see the underside of this thing, which reveals 3 gold pins. Those pins are thought to penetrate the suit and the arm of the wearer, becoming a biological interface. This, in fact, would become a conscious, living connection. Some of the layers within the structure are 3 microns in thickness. A human hair is 12. The wide end is thought to be a receiving dish or end. The small notch on the opposite end is thought to be the transmitting end. Every 15 to 30 seconds, this object produces some kind of anomaly thought to be some kind of generated source of power, creating a magnetic distortion. Very small, but constant. This is the undersurface. The material is very, very similar into what the suit was made out of that I could determine. The suit was very, very small in mesh, where this is very, very large. It is almost a fibrous, globular-looking construction. When touched, it felt moist, but yet there was no moisture on your skin. You can see the gold pins that protrude through the surface of the black material. Each one is painting a sphere of almost pure emerald.
Those are the 3 pins.
They are all different in length and different in dimension. When I first saw this thing, it was buried underneath a fern about 3 feet away from where this creature was in the woods. When I went to pick it up, I thought it was a can from a hiker until I got within about 5 inches of it, and then I realized that it wasn't. So I threw it in the thermal blanket and wrapped it up and brought it home. It's a very unusual shape. Its thickness varies from one end to the other. It's almost like a molded piece of sculpture. There seem to be no seams on it. The attachment of the black surface could not be determined on how it was attached. In a moment, you'll see the close-up of the black material, and it almost has a spider web look to it in layers. As you're sitting here watching this, I just want you to keep thinking one thought. If this happened to you, everything that you know that's happened to me, what would you do? Here's your close-up. You can see the spheres that are penetrated by each of the gold pins, and the black matrix surface that surrounds them. Underneath the matrix surface were little pouches of fluid, some kind of fluid that ran at different angles to different points of the cuff. The pins had no hole in them, so I'm assuming it was nothing to be let out or taken in, but probably part of the circuitry. I don't have that information. Somebody asked when I placed this on the arm of the creature, which I fondly took to calling Freddy, if the pins penetrated the suit. Yes, they did, into the arm, as far as I could determine. It clamped closed around the arm and turned instantly black. Pardon? I believe this is what people are looking for. Someone asked, is this what they're after? I'm sorry, I can't hear your questions.
Can we wait until we're at question and answer, please? And then we can bring people up to the microphone. You all have great questions. We just want everyone to be able to hear them.
Again, you can see the emerald spheres. Make some nice earrings. They'd be unique, I'll give you that.
All the properties and the abilities of the link artifact aren't known, even by the Alliance. There's still a lot of questions to be asked by them and others as to exactly what other properties, what other things this artifact can do.
It's thought that this interface with the wearer is also connected to another piece of, shall we say, hardware, possibly the obelisk, possibly something else. So it takes a combination of devices and consciousness to probably activate this. Not at this time. Are you volunteering to try it? Anyway, this is what I found, and this is what I think they're after. And I will say it one more time. I do not have it. I do not know how to get it at this time. I have one contact that contacts someone else, that contacts someone else, that contacts someone else, and maybe, under the right circumstances, I can get it back. But I do not want it back in fear of losing it and losing everything.
Good.
It's just about over.
I wanted to say something about the samples that were taken by Mr. Chacon. Shortly after the Art Bell interview, he was threatened and has left the country. But he told us that he will publish the report.
I took blood samples and tissue samples from Freddie when I did the exam. And we went on Art Bell December 9th and basically exposed this information with a lot of other information. Soon as that happened, soon as we were on that show, these people were threatened. My landlord of my old house went on that show and told what he saw in my house after it was torn apart. 3 days later, he was beat up by 3 men. This man is not a violent man. He has never had a problem in his life. Mr. Chacon was threatened.
I want you to ask yourself something. I want you to take the word sources and replace that word with human lives. You all have friends, you all have families, people you love and care about. Would you give them up? Would you surrender them to all these vultures?
You know, I'm here not to convince anyone. In fact, if I had this to do over again, I would have never done it like I did. I would have left this thing and walked away and pretended I never saw it because it's ruined my life. I have nothing left. I am dealing with with the only things I can handle, which is a day-to-day circumstance. I'm trying to keep some dignity in my life, and people keep taking it away. I have a right to tell what happened to me, and no one can take that away. And I will tell my story. And you have a right to know that this stuff is going on, and you're being told that it isn't. And it's not right. And I appreciate the fact that people have given me an opportunity to talk about it. Thank you.
Thank people that have made this a safe haven. People like Rob Baldwin and Sean Atlanti. I'm sure you all know these wonderful people, and the Browns. Extra security was put in place, and everybody that we've met that knew who we were kept an eye on our back and made us feel as safe as they possibly could. To each and every one of you, and to each and every one of those, God bless you. Thank you very much for that. Before we
for those of you who don't know, we've just published the story of the event, all of the happenings from day 1 through day 9 when the government came in and took the body in the freezer from Jonathan's house. Robert has been wonderfully good in putting together the personality and the character of Gary and Dolly, so you'll have an opportunity to find and meet these people in book form. I encourage you to please come and get a copy of it. There's so much more that you haven't heard that you really would like to. And at the present time, this is Jonathan's only source of income. So thank you for those who have and for those who would like to. After the presentation, we'll have a signing, and they'll both sign it for you. In the meantime, just prior to their questions, there is a statement that I want to read. Recently, during an interview, some pertinent information was assembled by a third and fourth party. This was released before Dr. Reed had an opportunity to review it. Unfortunately, some of this information was incorrect. We would like to clarify this misunderstanding in the statement. However, there have been others who have had similar situations to this where information was released. It's been twisted, it's wrongly used. Jonathan's been slandered and maliciously attacked. And in an attempt to stop this story from being told, there are powers that don't want you to know what's going on. They're trying to disallow you to witness the event through our eyes. We ask you only this, that you decide for yourself after having heard his story, seen the videos, the pictures, and the evidence, and we hope that the UFO community, through your own intelligence, will come to your own conclusions and not accept these poor attempts to assassinate him. Thank you.
I'd like to ask, before the questions begin, if he's in the auditorium here, Dr. Hine, to come forward. There he is. To give some information and incredible data.
Wait about 60 seconds. I need to swap stage.
No problem.
Take a deep breath, folks.
60 seconds pause.
There are pictures in the back of the book. We have photographs of Susie, so you all can get up close and personal with her. The video you're going to see right now. For all of you. Also, I'll let you know, I went to Vancouver and saw Jonathan 2 weeks after the event took place. I saw the what do you call it, little shaft that drains the fluid from the shunt. It's called a shunt, was put in to drain the fluid from the wound because it entered in through the shoulder and exited out through the back part of that shoulder. he was constantly having to change the wound, the bandage.
So now I have a place to put my pen. We went up to the question was, what happened to the obelisk? Obviously, I didn't drag it home. It wouldn't move. But my friend and I went back the next day. My friend was very determined. We took a trailer and chains. But he was thinking in the right direction. When we got there, there was nothing there. But there was nothing out of place. The ferns and the bushes that I pulled out of the way to take those pictures with a stick looked like they'd been replanted. It was pristine.
Are we ready for that video? Thank you. After the video, I'd like to hear from the doctor.
Cut the lights, please.
This is my shoulder, my left shoulder. It entered right above the collarbone and exited through my back in 3 places. I found the shell on the ground. It was a 9mm shell. I do not believe that the gun was meant to fire. I believe that it fired because I grabbed it. The look on the fellow's face was quite startling when it went off. I thought it had missed me. And I laid on the ground, and somebody came running over.
Lights, please.
And said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine, I'm fine." He said, "No, you're not. There's blood all over you." And I didn't even know I had been shot.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay. All right, doctor, please. Thank you.
Well, I'd just like to personally thank the 3 of you for the courage to come forward with this before I say that. We're all behind you, and thank you very much. In addition to working with Ron Russell on studying crop circles, I teach resonant viewing in Boulder, Colorado. I've worked with some of the viewers that have been here at the conference, and we viewed this event about 1.5 years ago after hearing you on the Art Bell show. And I gave the target to one of our best, most consistent viewers. The conditions are blind. The viewer has no idea what they're looking at. They get random numbers and no information, 0. They did the session themselves at home. And this particular viewer came up with an interdimensional craft that was on a reconnaissance mission. She drew the obelisk that you showed here today perfectly. And looking over the whole session, since I knew this viewer's record, I determined that this was a real event, or at least the data supported it very strongly, and that the session was very consistent. We've given the target to several other viewers since then, and have also gotten consistent results. So, contrary to what some of you heard on the Art Bell show, a viewer that appears on there fairly frequently, our data supported your data very strongly. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Reed, I commend you for being here. I've been following your story ever since it appeared on the internet, and I had a question about that. As you had this being either near or in this freezer, you even had a recording of this being actually made a scream as you opened up the freezer lid. It actually screamed. Could you comment on that, please?
I can play that. What happened was the original time when I met this thing in the woods, that is not, repeat not, when this recording was made. This recording was made in my garage on the 3.5 days after I brought this thing home wrapped up, and I had unwrapped it several times, examining it in detail, being as close to it as I am to you, and thinking it was dead, absolutely dead, touching the wound, seeing the blood, It was a dead piece of meat, and I had thrown it back in the freezer several times. On the third day, I went to the garage to put some things away, and I heard a noise coming from inside the freezer. And I thought it was rats. I thought the compressor was going out. I wasn't sure. But without thinking, I just thought, well, I'll just look inside and check the temperature. Well, I opened the door, and this thing sat up and screamed at me. A deafening scream that made me feel like something was pushing against my chest. Later on, this thing did this over and over until finally it didn't do it anymore. I don't know if it became accustomed to the weird look on my face or what, but it didn't do it anymore. But one of the times I recorded that sound, and that's the sound I played on Art Bell, and that's the sound I have here, and I will attempt to play it.
You want this one? He gets real loud.
That's the sound that it made.
In the book, Jonathan talks about how Gary just about blended with the gyprock on the wall when he heard that sound.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I came up because I promised Robert I would, and I've got a few comments. Number one, thank you so much for writing your book, for bringing this out, and I have a very selfish reason for you to continue this, because I'm going to give this to people, the people who I've had experiences, and the people who get that glassy-eyed stare when you're telling them about it. And if they think this is a fraud, then I challenge anyone to put something like this together. You know, all the people out there who say, oh, well, he's not doing anything, he's out for money. And that's another thing you're to be commended about. If you guys are out for money, you could have made tons by now.
You're right. Along with Dick Clark and Bob Kvyat.
I have one thing to say in regard to money, and it's in the book, and I've said it before. Somebody offered me over $1 million for my tape. A collector. And I thought about it real hard. And I decided not to do it, because if I did it, maybe no one would ever see this again. And I can't allow that to happen.
I thank you.
Thank you.
I got one more point to make, too. The things that have been done to you and others in this field, people who have seen stuff and experienced stuff and had, it's horrendous for any government. But for our government, this is all done in our name also.
That's right.
And for this government
now
to
you know
do
where
this,
some of your tax dollars go.
Yeah, for this government to do this is unconscionable.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi there. I'm Russell Callaghan from UFO Magazine back in the UK.
Welcome.
Thanks. I needed to come and just say one or two words here. I've heard some heavy emotion from both yourselves and within the audience. But, well, here goes. I'm 20 years a TV professional. And the camcorder footage we see at the beginning, where we're running through the woods to film the creature, hyperventilating, very much out of breath. I've picked a camera up and run 20 yards, and I can't stand still to hold the camera for a good 10-15 seconds. You need to catch your breath. Now, we saw some very still shots, and we do have doctors in the audience and doctors speaking, and if there's anybody there, please back me up. The thing you do when you go out of breath is you take a dip. And you were really out of breath, and for me, you'd be down there trying to catch your breath. But you did very well to keep the camera steady. Commend you, if that's the case. But the other thing is, if I turn this microphone that way, you're struggling to hear me now. Yeah, can't hear a thing? Well, the microphone on a camcorder is at the front of the camcorder. And generally speaking, when you've got the camcorder in your hand, that microphone is facing somewhere out there. but we heard the breathing, the words, and everything very, very clearly. Did you have a microphone on?
Hold it. Let's not get this out of control here.
Let me answer that.
Okay, please do.
The microphone on this Nikon 8mm video camera is a unidirectional microphone sticking out of the top.
Sure.
The viewfinder is on the top.
Okay.
The problem here is that
these questions have to be asked, my friend, because other people will ask them.
I don't have a problem with it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next question.
Next question,
Okay.
please.
I'm afraid I agree, Dr. Reed. I have no desire to offend, only to enlighten all of us. Technologically, I've spent 15 years in the television business, and I wanted to ask you, were you using the Steadicam? I do not ask this because I disbelieve or believe. I ask this because we need to know exactly what type of camera it was, what kind of film, and what the conditions were.
Nikon, straight 8, about 7 years old now. Standard Nikon video camera, older model, no Steadicam. And if you think that's steady, I'd hate to see, what wasn't.
That's ridiculous.
The other
it's
camera,
a reasonable question, sir.
The other camera that I had was a 35mm Nikon camera.
Okay, fine.
Standard film, some slide film, some print film.
Thank you.
I shot everything I had.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Yes.
As some of you know, I do reverse speech. And this was one of the more interesting reverse speech things that I've ever done.
What was your name, sir?
I'm sorry, I'm Larry Duffy.
Thank you.
And when you came out on Art Bell the first time and I heard you, of course I recorded it. And I basically believed everything you said. It sounded good. But I had to reverse it to find out. And I have spent more time reversing you and Robert than I have anybody else. Many, many, many hours. And I've got to tell you, you guys are telling the truth. Right. And when my mentor...
Thank you.
And when my mentor, Mr. Oates, came on the internet and said that you guys weren't, he ceased to be my mentor because that was total BS. Because I know the work, and I know that was slop job. That was terrible of him doing that. That he obviously did not listen to your tape and reverse the whole thing. So, and I would like to know a little bit more about this alliance. So you kind of glazed over that.
We can talk about that some other time.
Okay.
Yeah, there's still a lot of information.
Just a group of people who are organized to help some specific contactees.
For their own gain, though, really.
Yes, sir.
For their own purpose.
Okay, Dr. Reed, maybe I missed it in your presentation or you didn't have a chance to tell us, but what actually happened to the alien itself? If it was a corpse, did someone take it away or did it run away?
On the 9th day, when I drove past my house, I saw all these vans emptying my house. I went back hours later and found my house ripped apart. I went out to the garage in my house, and they had not only had they taken the body, which at the time was alive, but they had taken the entire freezer out of my garage by removing the door frame from the wall.
Yeah, okay, I sort of get that. This happened 9 days after they took
from the day that I brought it home.
Right. But you said 3 days afterwards that you saw the thing screaming at you from the fridge. I want to know what happened after that point, basically, if you remember.
At that point, the question is what happened to Freddie after he was reanimated.
Right.
Well, from time to time, after trying to regain a little composure, and it's all in the book, I went back out and opened the freezer. And this thing would scream at me, and then stop, and then look at me. And then from time to time, it would get out of the freezer on its own and sit right next to it. And then it would climb back in the freezer and close the lid. And what that meant to me was that apparently it liked the cold.
Any video of that?
I did videotape that. I did have still photographs of that, but I no longer do.
So you think that the person who raided your house might have got hold of the alien?
Well, there was one thing left. When I went to the garage and found the freezer gone, there were small footprints across the cement floor that looked like frost.
Okay.
And they went to the wall and stopped. And that's all I know.
Okay. Thank you for that. And on behalf of that gentleman who popped a question to pass on to you, he said, what do you think happened to the obelisk? Who took it away, if anyone?
I don't have an answer for that.
It probably returned to its source.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
I don't have all the answers. I am not an authority. I am only here to say what happened to me and what has happened since. You folks have 30 plus years of examining this material. I had 9 days, and it's a big difference. I need help from you guys, and I appreciate the support that all of you have given me to let me tell my story. Yes?
My name is Charlotte Lefevre. I'm coordinator for the Seattle Art Bell Chat Club, and we've been following your story very closely. And I do have a question. On the bracelet that was placed with the entity, you said you wrapped with the body. If I can ask why it wasn't photographed and presented at the same time when you first unwrapped and videotaped the entity, and why was it presented much later?
Well, it just happened in chronological order that I had taken it out when I brought the body in the house the first time.
You said you wrapped it with the body, you threw it in?
I threw it in and wrapped it up. And when I went back to the freezer the first time, after I'd brought it home, I unwrapped it, saw that the creature was not my dog, and simply taken it out.
You thought the body you had wrapped was your dog?
At the first time, yes.
You were not
You weren't
aware?
listening, Charlotte. Okay.
I've already explained
Okay.
that.
All right. Thank you.
Next question, please.
Dr. Reed, I wish to thank you with all my heart for what you've done and what you are doing. I thank you for having the balls to stand up against these sons of bitches that have been fucking off our world. And it's time we all stand up and face the full truth of what the hell has been done to us and what is being done to us and who they are and who the bastards are behind it.
That's right.
I myself have gone through similar things that you have gone through. I spent 6.5 years in prison, held illegally by our government as they tried to turn me into a vegetable. I have much information for you and for your friend there, and I wish to speak with you at your convenience after this meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And
Thank
folks,
you,
you had better pay attention to this man, what he's saying, because it's a short step from him to you. And these sons of bitches will kill every one of you to shut you up so that they can pull their one world takeover over. And it's going to cost you all your lives and total extinctions if you don't wake up and see what the hell's coming down the road.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Danny.
Yes, I definitely would like to thank you for bringing us so close to the truth. Many of us came here specifically to see this presentation. I had a chance to speak with you along the way, and I came to the conclusion yesterday, after spending only 15 minutes with you, I didn't need to see the video. I believed you. And I think that anybody who takes the time to know you would believe you just on your sincerity. And I don't know if anyone else shares that or if anybody else did that. But
Thank you. Thank you. Like I said, I don't expect anyone to believe me. All I wanted was a chance to tell you what happened to me and to tell you that I don't think this should happen to anybody, let alone people who have nothing to gain and everything to lose. And it's just not right.
We're going to have to move this along, folks, so...
I just have one very short question.
Quick.
What do you think, do you have a theory, or does the Alliance have a theory as to why the entity was at that particular place?
No, I don't. I don't know why he was there. I don't know what he was doing. I know that the Alliance is going to roll out the hardware one of these days. And they're going to prove it to everyone. And there's a reason why they're waiting. This is an educational process. We need to wake up and see that there are some different things in our world than what we've always been told. Things are not the way that we've always thought they should be or were. It's going to break down all of the barriers, and we're going to have a rude awakening soon.
Again, thank you for being so brave.
Thank you.
I have a statement to make for you, Dr. Reed, and everyone up here, and I'm sure that I speak for everyone in the room. I would like to address any government members who may be here or may be listening to this video at some future time. Give it up, guys. It's already out. 20 million people on Art Bell have heard this. 200 or 300 people in this room have seen it. And if anything happens to any one of the 3 people up here, we and many other people will hold the more despicable part of our government responsible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
You had said when first took the specimen out of the blanket, did you immediately try to disrobe it? I mean, that would be my first or
No, it was on the second examination that the cut was made.
You have to
Being
understand.
a doctor, you would disrobe anything to fully, I mean, to me, the mouth,
Actually,
the
he
feet,
tried.
the hands.
He tried that later.
First of all, I'm a psychologist.
Yeah, not bad.
Right, but you do,
Okay,
you know,
so
think
the only-
like most of us undress the thing. It's dead, you know, and you want to
I
get
had
down.
I had no inkling of wanting to get barely near it, let alone undress it.
But you had 9 days, and you eventually did get it on tape, you said, or where you tried to cut
Yes.
the outfit and that
Yes.
it did seal. And that was disappeared.
That is gone.
And why is certain material saved and others, I don't understand.
Saved? It was
yeah,
stolen.
Important.
It was stolen.
Right, it was stolen. How
It was
come the rest
taken.
wasn't, though? That's right.
Because I hid it all over the world.
Why
I
wouldn't
sent
you
it
hide
away.
the important
I divided it. I divided it into groups.
It's just a question,
Yes.
that's all.
I'm
Everyone
sorry,
should be
I'm
open-minded.
sorry.
I don't disbelieve anything.
I divided.
Everyone should be in love here. That's not fair.
Let me answer
We're in
her
America.
question.
It's a talk.
So we all know. I
To share.
divided it into groups, and I sent it away to preserve any of it I could. I had a feeling that it was, before very long, somebody was going to grab me or everything I had. That's why I did it.
Yeah.
It's all in the
I'm
book.
going to buy the book.
Thank
I
you.
am.
By
Thank
the
you.
way, somebody mentioned to me that we only have 10 copies left. That's not correct. I have 150 copies left. I don't know how many of you are going to be able to get it, but if we run out today, then I'm going to give you an address.
And in regard to something that was on the website, that we only sold 15 books, I don't think so.
Okay. For those who would like to write it down, I'll give it to you now. It's JR-Spectrum, SPECTRUM, P.O. Box 16007, again 16007, Seattle, Washington. The zip is 98116. We also, our website, for those who haven't been to it, is www.odysseylink.net. ODYSSEY.
Link.
Link. L-I-N-K, one word. .net.
Somebody also, let me just add one thing. Somebody has also asked me if I communicated with Freddie once I knew he was up and moving. I tried to. I tried to give him some water, which he took from a cup. And then he later threw the cup at me.
He's a playful fella.
He left me with impressions. He left me with extreme migraines. Like there was so much information being impacted to me that I couldn't take it. He one time screamed at me and I yelled no and put my hands over my ears. And he stopped. And then he opened his mouth again a little later as if he was going to scream, and he didn't. So he was probably testing me.
Yeah.
Yes,
well,
sir.
that might be related to the question I had too. I was going to ask you if you were certain, on thinking back on it, was Susie's death intentional, or could it have been something to do with Susie making contact with that artifact and wristband, or an accident of some sort like that? Or do you feel he really meant to kill Susie?
As far as I can determine what I saw, and I was about 10 feet away, Susie was in a fight for her life. And at the moment that I saw it, I assumed Susie was attacking. But I think now that I can think back on it, it was also attacking Susie. But I believe now that it was defending itself in probably the only way it could. And I'm sorry that it happened. You know, I'm sorry that I hit it. Because I wish it was here now.
One more question?
Yes, sir.
I'd never really seen this video beforehand, but one...
Nobody else has either,
well,
except San Diego.
Oh, another video that I thought might be related to it, but some years ago there was a video that was said to be, again, Art Bell. Heard a lot of it from his show. They kind of call it or refer it as like an alien interrogation video.
Okay. I don't know anything about that.
It was a fake tape?
I have no idea, sir. I don't know anything about it.
Oh, I was just wondering, has anybody thought about, because we were unsure what happened with Freddie afterwards, has anybody thought that that might be Freddie?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
No.
That was done before.
No.
All right.
Thank you. Next.
From this point on, if you could, just one question so we can try to get all you guys in. Thank you.
I find your story so believable, one, because of your emotions, both of you, as you tell your story. It just seems so real. But my one question would be, if I had a story like that, why wouldn't you go to like 60 Minutes or Barbara Walters or something?
Would you believe it?
I would try it just to get it out even more, all the millions of people.
I went to the media during the 9 days. I went to our television station with a videotape that you saw. That videotape was confiscated by the Department of Energy and the Seattle Police Department. I was called by a producer who informed me of that and said, look out for these guys.
Welcome to America.
I could hear your sensitivity towards Freddie, and so this question came up to my mind. Did you ever consider taking him back to the woods so that he might possibly have a chance to live and go back to his, like they do us, they take us back?
I did not consider that, but so much was happening so fast.
No, I mean after he screamed and you found he was alive in the locker later.
He seemed to be very comfortable where he was, and I was afraid to get near him, quite honestly.
At one point, Freddie forcibly shut the freezer, sending Jonathan off balance. This little creature has a tremendous amount of strength.
He was strong like an orangutan.
But you didn't try to meditate and communicate with him and ask him if he wanted to go back?
I tried my best to keep my sanity.
Yes.
And,
I don't mean to sound stupid, but a lot of metaphysicians...
You're not sounding stupid.
Thank you.
And I just reacted as I would if this was an animal, because I felt that it was maimed. I saw the wound. I dressed it. I even closed it up. And it started to heal, which I took for just, as things are in the freezer, things stick together. Well, that's what I thought.
Well, I'm not judging you because I understand so perfectly,
fine.
And I think that you did everything you possibly could. And
You'll
I
understand.
Yes, I do. And seeing you and feeling your empathy,
There
you're
is
beautiful.
There is so much
Yes.
information both in the book and that has yet to come out that will explain much, much more.
Well, thank you for your courage.
Jonathan didn't talk about the visitors he had on day 3 or 4 from the government who told him that if he did have anything extraterrestrial, he should hand it over to them now, and for him to keep his mouth shut. His dog ran away, you know. The trip out into the woods nothing happened.
That explains it all.
And he was told that the next group who came would not be as nice as they were. And the next group that came took everything he had and wiped out his life. And that was a group from NSA, National Security. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say how compassionate that I feel, and I feel really emotional about the cover-up and how it's affected John.
I'm suffering.
He just hasn't got a life anymore, basically.
I'm suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome.
You know why I'm here? So do I, because don't think it's only America, it's in England.
It's
People
it's
murder
everywhere.
people,
Yes,
you know? I, in a way, I'm standing here now, but I've been murdered. Do you think I can prove my story? No. Even the solicitors are holding back information. Princess Diana was murdered. It's everywhere.
You know,
corruption, power abuse is everywhere.
What I've learned from someone like Sean Atlanti is everybody has something to say about what's happened to them, because this is a global thing. These things happen to a hell of a lot of people, but you know what? 98% of them don't talk. They hide away. What are our mental institutions filled with? Are they really filled with people that just couldn't hack it? Or are they filled with people that were placed there by individuals that didn't want them to talk?
Listen, I've been trying to publish and make my story public. No newspaper has helped me, and it's been very, very hard to live with, because I'm here now. I don't know how long for, but I've been murdered because the
character assassination is one of the worst things that can ever happen to an individual. Thank you for sharing your story.
Because they didn't listen to me, and they didn't do what they should have done in time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and I don't judge you. And I think that even if you had brought Freddie with you and he were sitting over there with you, that you would still have to have some
We'd
problems.
have to prove it.
Some people here.
Yeah.
I believe that some people should watch The Insider, which was about 60 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the reason why you couldn't bring it over there. Of course.
They're not there to present this kind of material. That's
Of
not what they're
course.
for. The closest 60 Minutes has ever gotten to being real about anything is when they did a very obscured, very rarely seen, but it's in their archives, video or show on the black corporations, which they've never shown again in any form.
Right, and if I just wonder how much people cannot believe these sort of issues, and then they can believe about killings of thousands and thousands of people all over the world in the name of freedom, democracy. But they cannot believe this, which is a lot of evidence, a lot more than mainstream news media showing.
A little over 3 years ago.
Right. How much does it take?
I would have never believed this myself.
I think the material that you're presenting is extremely convincing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've had a camera, video camera, and I've recorded with a video camera, and I can hear my voice. I don't need to have this microphone. We don't have the same kind of microphone on a video camera.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I wonder if you are cooperating with Dr. Greer.
We haven't talked to Mr. Greer yet, but we will. Thank you.
Jonathan, my name is Donald Ware. We all have great empathy with you, and I think many of us here would have done the same thing you did.
Thank you.
I have studied the human reaction to the alien presence for 48 years. I spent 26 years in the Air Force. I know that the Robertson panel codified the U.S. government policy on that issue in 1953, which generally said it is in the national interest to keep the public from getting too excited about the alien presence. And I was in the service long enough to know that when we develop a national policy, we develop procedures in order to implement that policy. The best I've got them figured out is that first they put an aura of ridicule around the whole subject to keep people from talking too much.
It worked on
And
me 5 years
it
ago.
worked very well for a long time and is still working on some people. If there are people who have things to say that would cause the public to get too excited, I personally believe that not everybody is ready for the alien presence because of their whatever their spiritual
Awareness.
reason for being here is. But
I agree.
Step 2 is close surveillance and combined with threats, often threats of life. And close surveillance means being watched while you know you're being watched.
They're here now.
If that doesn't down or stop you, they go to step 3, which is to pick you up and make you forget what they don't want you to talk about. And I'm glad, and I hope they never do go to step 3.
They have. They have tried.
They've tried.
But I didn't have the information that they wanted.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. We're with you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Mark.
My name is Mark. I'm a cameraman in Los Angeles, and I'd like to donate my time to you in the future to maybe reenact some of your things and get them on tape for you to make your presentation even stronger.
Thank you.
An excellent presentation today.
Thank you.
One of the things I'd like to say is that you can continue to do a strong, a great thing for us as humanity and for an American public by taking this to people and younger people. And so keep telling your story, because those young people don't hear about this very often. They might hear it through the internet, but we haven't made this kind of presentation. And your convincing argument is that prior to this whole experience, you were probably a skeptic or completely uninformed.
Absolutely.
And completely ignorant. You ignored the subject matter totally, I'm sure, close
I
to
didn't
total.
believe in any of it.
So in that argument alone, you will be incredibly powerful in your ability to convince people in the future.
I appreciate what you're saying, but I want to add something. You know, I said it earlier, I said this isn't easy. And I am about at the end of my rope. My life has been fractured, and emotionally I am barely able to get up each day. I still can't eat right. I still am afraid of my shadow for good reason. I can't sleep. I've considered suicide, and that's exactly what they want.
That's what they drive you to.
And that's what's so hard about this. You know, everybody has been extremely supportive and encouraging. But you know, this is like one step away from death to me. And like I said, I'm not good at this. You guys all are good at this. And I'll do what I can, and with the help of my friends, we got it into a book. And I will keep going as long as I can. I promise.
Well, this UFO community has a lot of infighting and backfighting and all that, but we are a community, and we are here to listen, and we're here to make a forum, a powerful forum for you folks to be able to do so. I've been an investigator, by the way, for MUFON for about 20 years, and I've had offices within MUFON as a state section director and an assistant state section director now for MUFON LA. And even though MUFON LA has its problems as well, we are here to make that forum for stories like yours to be able to come out, because the authorities will not take your stories in most cases. Police, if they have not had their own experience, they'll laugh at you or whatever. They'll be quite skeptical. So let's go forward, by the way, all of you in this room, and let's not create a hostile environment for this forum, but let's approach it with some diplomacy.
You put together a group of people who want to hear this story, and I will get Jonathan there.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. You'll come, won't you?
I'm the guy who was shouting over there earlier. I want to apologize to everyone. That's not the way to deal with this. I left the room and I thought to myself, why did I do that? Let me come back and speak plainly to everyone. I'm a prosumer videographer. I shoot with a camera like this. I've been doing it for many years now. And if I have to go up even a slight hill, I'm going, I'm a little bit overweight. That microphone hears you very well in a quiet situation like in the woods or out in a crop circle. Right. That guy, I think he's used to professional cameras and a boom mic or something.
Right.
Well, I wasn't being quiet either.
No, of course.
I mean, the questions they asked, I understood. I apologize. I got a little upset. I'm tired. I get a little bit tired of the attacks that I've seen on Jonathan, and they really weren't attacking, they were just asking questions. And the fact is, the camera was very shaking. You can hear the breathing. If he did bend over, half the time that you couldn't tell if he did or didn't because of the interference of the obelisk.
I don't expect anyone to accept and believe any of this. That's not my point. My point is, look at it, decide for yourself, and open your eyes, because it's happening to other people all around us.
I hope you're not misunderstanding me.
No, I'm not.
I know exactly what was happening to you.
Right.
My camera does the same thing. That guy was the one who didn't know.
Oh, no, we understand your support.
Okay.
Thank you. We appreciate it very much.
Thanks for
Okay,
clarifying.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Be gentle on me, Ken.
Oh, it's going to be simple questions, okay? First, I want to come to the side of those people who got chastised for asking you questions. I think that was real tacky and unprofessional.
Thank you,
I
Ken.
love skepticism. I think it's healthy. And I don't think you have anything to worry about, but I think the crowd should not react that way. I love questioning authority and everything else. The other thing is that, let's see, you mentioned a pseudopod reaching out for Susie. As I understand, a pseudopod is an amoeba-like arm that reaches out. And
It was an extension of the creature's arm itself, as if part of his suit actually grabbed the head of my dog.
Like a metamorphosing or morphosing. Okay, and then you were about 60% of my reason for coming. I love the International UFO Congress. I think it's an amazing amount of people, or type of people, just avant-garde people. I love coming here, but you were like a major reason for me coming, and I continue to be encouraged by your story.
Thank you.
So that's it.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This gentleman's from Alaska. He came a long way to be part of it. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Marie, and I'm a Japanese journalist. And I'm following up your story since day first, and you had the show. Twice, I believe. And I just small question. When you saw the obelisk hovering in the air, did you see any windows or any kind of?
No, in the obelisk, there were no openings, there were no windows, there were no seams at all. I took a stick underneath it and drug it underneath it all the way. There was no wheels, no landing gear, no suspended anything.
Okay.
It was as if it was anchored right in the air.
Okay. Another thing is, I just imagine that could be underground, could be the vortex, the power from the underground. So that was maybe able to hover.
That's possible.
Did you feel any vibrational kind of your body?
Well, when I fell against the obelisk, for a split second, I felt like I was inside of something where I didn't like it, and then I was outside again. Was I imagining this? I don't know, but that's what I felt. And later on, I found out that my shirt was no longer torn, and it was earlier.
Wow.
Thank you
in the book, right?
Yes,
it is in the book.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, Melinda.
Hi, guys. First of all, I want to applaud your courage, and
I can certainly speak for myself and probably for a lot of experiencers, and certainly my lab experiencers that may be in this room. So much of what you say matches what we go through as my lab experiencers, and I applaud you and your courage to come out with this. So first of all, I want to say that.
Thank you.
Secondly, I've had the opportunity in the last 10 or 15 minutes to talk to some pretty major key researchers, very serious guys whose work I admire greatly, and I appreciate their involvement in this field as much as I appreciate your willingness to come forward. May I suggest something, and I'm probably not the first person to say this to you guys. The researchers and the serious researchers in this field, I'm shaking saying this, require evidence in the form of documentation, and I know you guys know this. If there's a police report from when your house was ransacked, have a copy, a photo.
If you were the, excuse me a second, I understand what you're asking, but if you were the NSA and you raped and pillaged a person's house, would you want a police report left?
Did you have the police come after that happened to your house? All right.
Gary was there, or Larry, the landlord. He talked about it on the Art Bell show as to what damage had been done to his home.
Well, secondly, the results from the blood and those things,
they will all be published.
They'll all be published.
The charts on the letterhead, I encourage that you present those the next time you talk. We are having to take, and not to say I don't believe you guys, because I do, and you're talking from an emotional level and from experience that as my lab experience I know is real. But to present your case as factual, this community works in such a way, I just want to encourage you guys to have that kind of stuff.
Well,
to have those lab results in form before you speak again, so you can show a slide of a picture of them.
Can I say something?
Only because it will be a great support to you guys. And,
okay.
And
we'll do what we
I
can
do this
to
in your
get
behalf.
this.
In your support, I encourage you to do this.
I want to say something. Okay? Not everything in life depends on documentation.
And I know that of all people.
You have some huge evidence here. You have Jonathan. We have the video with the alien blinking, I'm alive. How much more do people want? What do we have to scrape the ends of the universe to prove this? He's been through enough. It's over. We have what we have. We'll try to get that other information out.
It'll be published as it comes out.
It will.
Okay. If you're publishing, thank you, and therefore you're hearing what I say. I'm just trying to do this in support of you guys. But you persuaded quite a few people here today, and again, you weren't here to do that, but the byproduct of what you shared did persuade a bunch of people. You caused a lot of people to consider your case more seriously than ever before.
Thank you, Melinda.
And I appreciate your encouragement. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
My name is Sean Alente. Some of you might have heard me on the Art Bell show, and I just want to make a couple last statements. I'm going to be the last person. One, I did receive an email from Djonathan Rīd on the shooting on Friday, April 2nd, 1999. It's a couple of weeks after it happened, just for some supportive evidence. That's what I'm doing. And I received a couple emails when he was out of the country also, in doing obviously the link artifact and other things. And I wanted to make one statement on records, which has come up on the internet, which is work records, college records. I've known a couple individuals who've been in either classified situations or work situations where the records couldn't be found. I've talked to some other researchers also who have come across similar things, Wendell Stevens being one. So some of you have seen that on the internet, on the records situation. So if they want to expunge someone's records bad enough, they will do that. So I just want to make that statement because...
Thank you, Sean.
And
Sean, in addition to that, I'd just like to say somebody else tried to verify or substantiate some of my employment information and was told that this information cannot be released. So it's interesting to find out how somebody got it released when it can't be released.
It's actually illegal.
Yeah, that's another thing also, that anybody just can't call up a college and say, I want the students' records that went there.
That's right.
So some of the information, I'm not saying all of it, that was out on the internet, I don't think is correct. And if anybody that really truly wants to believe all that should check it out for themselves. Okay, I haven't did that yet. But I just wanted to make that statement that people make a lot of misstatements about other people in this field when it comes to
We're supposed to be all supporting each other and helping each other get through a traumatic struggle here in the UFO community, and it really shocks me that at times people will try and cut each other up. For what reason? When you're supposed to be all believers. I asked a lady today who was asking me questions. I said, do you believe in God? And she said, well, I believe in the source. I said, prove it. Can you prove the source to me? Jonathan doesn't have to prove anymore. We've got pictures, we've got video, we've got DNA. You know, I mean, wake up, folks. You've just seen the proof.
And one final thing, from my conversations with Pam on the phone, and then another lady called Chris, I won't say her last name, who's a friend of Rob and Robert Race, and my personal conversations with Jonathan on the phone, he is going through this process, this stress, this anxiety, this trauma process, virtually most all the time. So this is not like one act up here, in front of everybody, or on the Art Bell show. That's all I have to say.
I have known for a year, both Robert and Jonathan. I have communicated on a 3 to 4 day basis, either by telephone or by email with Jonathan as he traveled and in person throughout the world for the last year. This man is fragmented, he is shattered, his life is shattered, and it bothers me when people accuse him as well.
Anybody want to give me a job?
He needs some help. Okay. With that, I think Bob Brown's got a few things to say. Thank you very, very much for being here, for supporting us.
Robert, Pam, Jonathan, thank you guys very much. It has been, to say the least, a stimulating presentation. It's going to cause much discussion, much thought, much argument, I'm sure. We thank you guys all for coming. George Knapp is our next presenter, and we're going to ask George to postpone his presentation by to go, because you're not going to get in and out other than to go. Oh, yes. Now, Robert and Jonathan and
Focus. Lucy. Where is it? Oh, come on. Come on. Work. Fuck. Come on. Come on. swear to I'm not gonna believe it. Where are you? Where is it? You see it?